Recording in progress. All right. Super excited about this topic. Um, I think it's fun and um, also speaks to larger issues and bigger subject um, that is sometimes harder to talk about. I'm coming from Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi, or the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, as well as the Tsuut'ina and Yahe Nakota, which includes the Chiniki, Wesley, and Bearspaw First Nations, um, and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. The reason that I do a land acknowledgement every single time we do a workshop is um, to continue to bring the um the subject and the morality of you know the history of how we think about um drugs and drug use today and bring it into historical context, which was heavily impacted by colonialism, and the import of Christian morality. And so especially the impact of Christian morality on prohibition and how that has continued to shape our understanding of substance use, and substances, and what is licit and illicit, or moral and immoral. So it's important to have the context, the decolonizing context, when we have any of these conversations, because it's a huge part of our history that we're still trying um, to we're still actively working towards decolonization. I also want to warn folks, or let folks know, that there is um, going to be some like graphics of illicit substances, needles, razors, as well as like the subjects of urban legends and witchcraft, and also some substance use stigma in media. Those are going to be some common um, just going to be what we're going to be talking about today. So if it's something that you think um, you're going to be activated by, please do set yourself up for success by like having some plans for people that you can talk to, or like self-care routines that you can get into. The distress center line is our phone number is here for anyone who needs it, um, before we dive in. We're going to start with talking about some of the history, and as we go, we're going to sprinkle in um, some fact checking, and then get into some more contemporary like versions of what we're talking about today. So the concept that we're of like substances, or um, like unsafe foreign objects like needles and razors in candy has been like coined as a term, or Halloween sadism is kind of the coined term for it. It was coined in the like later half of the 1900s, and it's a practice of like giving those like contaminated treats during trick or treating. Um, Joel Best didn't coin the term, but he's been investigating it since like 1985. So he wrote a whole book on it, as well as like he has um, a ton of information on his website about the like latest articles and what actually came of those news stories. Um, and I use a lot of his research in creating today's presentation. But this concept of Halloween sadism is really best like described as a contemporary urban legend. That like we need to be constantly checking Halloween treats and Halloween candy, only at this time of year though, for foreign objects and like foreign substances. A lot of um the story building that comes from this concept comes from like lots of early symbolism and early concepts, such as like the poisoned apple, which we can see in like many different stories, as well as the fact that apple literally derives from the Latin meaning of evil. This like concept of the poisoned apple being kind of like early story builders for for this like current phenomenon. Another thing people often would refer to when talking about um, foreign objects in Halloween candy is something called the witch bottle. Um, the earliest records being like from the 1600s. It's a super old practice. It was actually used by witches with the either with the by witches for the intention of protection against dark magic. It soon spread to um especially around Samhain, or the time of Halloween, as like a thing that in some cultures, particularly European cultures, people would create a witch bottle which contained like sharp objects, broken glass, needles, quills, even just like toxic substances from bugs or toxic herbs, rust, arsenic, even like urine. They were used as protection against evil. So this concept of like sharp objects might also be a contributing factor to this current urban legend. However, there are some in like more recent history, there are some evidence or there are some incidences that are notable. This is just like a few highlights. There are a couple other ones that like on Joel Best's website he gets into. Um, but a few examples that I thought were particularly hilarious and also story building, I think. In 1959, a California dentist, his name was William Shine, distributed 450 laxative lace candies to children, 30 of whom did fall ill but recovered perfectly fine. And he was later charged with outrage of public decency and unlawful dispensing of drugs. Um, in 1964, which was another like high profile case and made headlines like across the United States, was a 47-year-old mother from Greenland, New York. Her name was Helen Pfeil. And she handed out bags of treats containing arsenic laced ant traps, metal mesh, scrubbing pads, and dog biscuits. Um, she told police that she didn't mean it maliciously, but was annoyed by the Halloween custom. Um, she later committed to state hospital for mental observation. Um, these treats were like very obviously not treats, so nobody was harmed. Um, in 1974, however, there was a child who died. Um, However, the media published a ton of like child dies of Halloween candy. Like the news articles were very fear-mongery about this death. Um, it was in Deer Park, Texas. Um, and um, he claimed that there were Pixie Sticks candies that were handed out to his two kids. And his 8-year-old son Timothy died suddenly that night. The autopsy later showed that the boy ingested cyanide. The police managed to recover the poison candy that he had ended up handing out to 5 other children, or this father had claimed he had received this candy from a house, but could not remember what house he got it from. And the police had done an investigation and had um, recovered other poison candy from other houses. There were no other reports of death, but it was later determined that the father who reported the incidents actually um, was actually guilty of poisoning his own son. Um, and his goal was to poison other children to make it look like a Halloween treat poisoning gone wrong. He was convicted and executed of the crime in 1984. No other child died. In 2000, one of the only known cases of someone being charged in connection with Halloween candy being tampered with using foreign objects was in Minneapolis. James Smith was charged with felony adulteration after 4 teenagers told police that they received chocolate bars that were later found to contain needles. This is according to the Minnesota Star Tribune. One of the children was reportedly injured by a needle after he bit into the chocolate bar, but did not require medical attention. Smith, the person who handed out this candy, was deemed unfit to stand trial, so there wasn't a whole lot of information on like his intentions. He was later committed to a mental health facility. In 2001, 2016, and 2017, children were hospitalized for suspected candy poisoning. All of these cases were later found to not be related, and also like for a number of different reasons, whether that be because children, the 3 examples include like children finding drugs and blaming it on candy, children trying to get attention, or there were like lots of different lots of different reports on the reasons as to why and how these poisonings happened. So there is a history of like incidences on and around Halloween. Almost every single one of them, as we're gonna see, has a like more complex or like more in-depth story to it. However, the media portrays a lot of these stories as the same thing, as this like concept of Halloween candy being poisoned by other people, and that we should constantly be checking our Halloween candy. Just a few examples. Another few examples. In Detroit in 1970, a 5-year-old died after eating heroin, which he claimed was hidden in Halloween candy. The follow-up story that was discovered was that Kevin had found heroin in his relative's home, and the parents had blamed it on Halloween candy. In 1978, in Flint, Michigan, Patrick was a 2-year-old who died after eating Halloween treats. Said the like news, these are all like news, like headlines, stories that went wild. And the headlines are all very enticing, very scary, very serious. And later you find out that there were actually no drugs found in his system, and that he died of natural causes. Another example, 7-year-old collapsed while trick-or-treating and died. And her parents repeatedly told media that she had heart problems and died of her heart issues. However, the media really decided to take it and run with it. Another example, in British Columbia, 4-year-old girl died after eating some Halloween candy. Police advised parents to throw out all Halloween treats. This is in the headline. Later, pathology tests showed no evidence of poisoning, and the autopsy showed she died from an infection. So all of these fun headlines made big news, and they made and the stories were all widely distributed. However, the follow-up stories, if any, did not get anywhere near the same attention, or they weren't published at all. Similarly, stories about foreign objects. There was a huge phenomenon, or like a huge request for radiologists who were asked to x-ray Halloween candies. Every single one of these reports reported no foreign objects. And if there were foreign objects, they were isolated incidences of like pranks gone wrong, and it being specifically to that one kiddo or one incident, and it wasn't a widely distributed phenomena, or like a widely distributed situation. This isn't to say that like drugs or substances being found in or substances and like foreign objects, that like these incidences that happen aren't serious, or aren't issues. Children taking heroin or putting needles in their candy to get their parents' attention is a serious issue. And the media or the way we talk about these stories is not the same reasons, is not for the same reasons that we think they are. Anecdotally, I wonder if the media or the stories or the headlines that are shared weren't so heavy on the scare tactics, if even these evidence would, if these incidences like would be as prevalent. So looking at contemporary times, and oh, I don't know why the fun Zoom link is right there, but these headlines are all examples of Canadian headlines. For example, the one underneath the weird Zoom link says Calgary police warn of possible candy tampering in Northwest neighborhood. Police warn families to check Halloween treats after possible candy tampering. Our Halton police warn of tampered Halloween candy. Halloween candy safety. What are the dangers in Canada and how to look for tampering? Ontario police warn to check your Halloween candy after needle and tablets are found. Parents are being urged to check their children's Halloween treats after Winnipeg police discover at least half a dozen reports of children getting cannabis edibles in their bags. So notice this like really common language that's being used, like warn and urge, danger, drugs, all these like hot topic or like hot, big, scary words. Lists of recommended precautions, routinely advise parents to inspect their children's treats, make sure they can see through, like make sure they check them as they're going around. All these kind of things. There's a ton. These lists come out every single year around this time, and every time it is not based in evidence. Even today, I found an article that said Pennsylvania State Police warn parents of THC-infused candy ahead of Halloween. And then the subheading says they aren't implying that police are, or that people are intentionally poisoning Halloween candy, but bringing awareness to that there are drug-infused products out there. But the title of the title of the article really says something different. And again, what we see, another example, cannabis edibles found in children's Halloween candy in Winnipeg. Alberta Halloween candy packages, presumptive positive for fentanyl. These are the headlines, right? I opened these articles and I read the whole thing. And what I found was in that same article, if you read down a little bit, these articles say it could be a hoax, that the candies inside the packages may not actually be drugs. Surprise, surprise, testing confirmed there was no THC in the package. If we do go back, like in the bottom left corner of this like Nerds Rope package, you can see that like there is a little warning that says THC on the side. They still have like yet to figure out like what this packaging comes from, and like, or like why. But they concluded that it was a prank. However, this information was never released in the same way that the first one was. Similarly to the fentanyl scare, the article states that the test means it's also possible that someone had fentanyl residue on their hands when they were handling the package. Later confirmed through testing, but did not like there was no fentanyl inside the candies. These cases, or these like articles that come out, or these incidences are like, according to Joel Best, the cases that start in the early 2000s until now are all discovered to be hoaxes. However, articles do not come out post-testing to confirm that there were no drugs, and this creates this like false sense of panic among specifically parents, among the population, or among these parents, every single Halloween. I see we have a question. If you want to, you can use the Q&A setting, or I'm happy to unmute you if you'd like. Okay. Go for it, my friend.
Sorry, are comments allowed?
Yeah, of course.
I wasn't sure if because I was a little late. I apologize. I wasn't sure if this is something that you have already touched on, but what you're talking about is making me think of the CNN effect.
Sure, go on.
So yeah, basically just like this theory kind of about how the media essentially like can impact real policies because of things like kind of like what you're showing us, like kind of like, you know, like fear mongering. But I think a lot of times, like, the problem with the media is like the media is so focused on like, you know, getting attention for the sake of like wanting to like stay relevant, or like, you know, so they're trying to get like all of the clicks online or whatever. And I think that that like really plays into and can seriously impact policies in like a scary way.
Yeah, the CNN phenomenon being kind of like a chicken or egg situation, right? Is this a phenomenon that the media is reporting, or is the media reporting causing a moral panic, causing the phenomenon? Um, and this like back and forth chicken or egg kind of like um, concept means it's hard to identify like where it originates. Um, yeah, I really appreciate um your comments. We hadn't talked about like the CNN phenomenon, but that is essentially what we're getting at, right? That like not only do these create fear mongering, but here in our next slide, um, concepts of like this fear mongering goes all the way to like the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA in the US, is like warning of brightly colored fentanyl used to target young Americans. So there's this like real effect on policy, um, on on systems that perpetuate the fear of substances. And there should be a real fear around fentanyl, but the targeting of these ads do not target um, they do not advocate for fentanyl testing um, for houseless population. They do not advocate for um, a lot of the movements that harm reduction movements are advocating for, because those don't align with their I'm going to use the like the concept of family values. Like a lot of this is about like protecting the children, um, especially when we're talking about this like um, what they call like rainbow fentanyl. It's a phenomenon where in the US, there is like a huge a huge phenomenon of politicians and media warning people about this new fentanyl that is rainbow colored and has letters on it to make it look like candy to target children, to like get them hooked early. And this really, this concept of like getting children hooked early, first of all, is based in like our concepts of drugs being inherently addictive rather than a symptom of like um, a larger social issue. There's also like a ton of reports and headlines that villainize and make and blame what they call like Mexican cartels. And then they will continue to like they'll go on to talk about how they should shut down the border and they should put more policing in the border to like prevent drugs from crossing into the US. Um, and so a lot of this is um, is an open a door to open to talk about the issues that they care about. And a lot of that is seated in classism and racism and so many other isms. What drug researchers and harm reduction activists all will say is that um, if anything, if drugs are being packaged to look like candy, it's a form of like disguising for smuggling purposes. But typically speaking, colors and letters are used to distinguish different types of drugs. And that's something that that like substances and drugs have done forever, including your pharmacist. It's a way to like prevent overdose to make sure that like people know what they're taking. Um, Also, many harm reduction advocates and many drug or substance experts will like highly doubt that they would give away like such an expensive and like highly sought after like substance and product to minors who don't have the means to like continue to become like they don't have the money potentially to become like regular customers. Also, they're more likely to get caught if they're handing them to children who have the observations of parents. Um, and especially when we're talking about giving away free candy or free drugs. Um, Almost everyone I know who I shared this workshop training, the title of which um with were like, oh, free drugs? That'd be great. I wish. So like this concept of handing out free drugs during Halloween to get people hooked is based in this like concept that small plug for like our substance use and harm reduction trainings. You can learn more about why it's how it came about. I suggest like looking into the what's called the rat park phenomenon, which is essentially to say that like um, there was a huge campaign um, for limiting drug use in um, ages ago. I don't remember the time frame, but um, they really hammered through into the public that getting hooked on drugs meant you were hooked for life and that you were addicted for life. And what the reality shows is that many people can take drugs once or twice and not become addicted, and that it's more about the social environment that people are living in that causes them to continue to use or continue to take substances for dealing with those social environments. And so youth, although there are rising like mental health concerns among the youth population today, are not a good population for targeting the cell or the targeting children for continued um, continued purchasing of their drugs. Um, and giving them away for free is certainly not something that would happen. So, reality that we're talking about here is the three kind of like main points that everyone who studies Halloween sadism comes to is that the media warns every year about the dangers of Halloween, say about tampering with drugs. But there are very few incidences of tainted Halloween candy that have been confirmed, and there is not a single incident that resulted in serious injury or death. And those are when we're talking about Halloween sadism, we're talking like someone else distributing candy for the purpose of social um for like the purpose of hurting other people, um and it being like widely distributed has never happened. So the cases of death that we have seen are have been found to be other have other reasons for death and or um other reasons for like motive, I guess. So this concept of Halloween sadism can really be best seen again as like a contemporary legend. And these are ways that society today like expresses anxiety. So we do have a drug toxicity crisis. Society is anxious about that, especially substance user communities who are seeing friends and family die of drug toxicity poisonings all the time. And so this could be one of the ways that socially the public is trying to cope with this very real issue. And again, that like that this is not necessarily the most this is not what harm reduction advocates are advocating for. Like this could be a door into talking more about like harm reduction um, and and movements and solutions that substance user communities are talking about, but it never does lead to that. It leads to other types of conversations. Um, Another phenomenon that has been reported and is very interesting is that concerns around Halloween candy tend to be particularly high in years when some sort of terrible recent crime has heightened public fears. So while drug toxicity poisonings are an ongoing, and the opioid crisis is an ongoing issue, the public is not necessarily hearing about it because we're not reporting as much on it, and we're not creating as much public like fear as what these articles create. But there is an example in 1982 when seven people were mysteriously killed in Chicago by cyanide-based laced Tylenol capsules, not um not in conjunction with Halloween, but that year related that year there were an extremely high number of warnings for Halloween candy, and it continued for a few years after, that these like high warnings often like referred back to the poison Tylenol capsules, or that like this is a correlation that researchers saw, is that when there was something like the Tylenol scare that went hugely went massive in the media, um, for years to come, there were really high warnings um, of of um, of laced Halloween candy. So I think the important message that I want to get across today um, is that there's a difference between fear mongering and real change, right? Harm reduction advocates and activists are angered by the fear mongering that is taking place, that is centered around the fear of protecting children, which is very valid, and that like all human life is valuable. And there are people dying of drug toxicity poisoning or drug poisonings. Um, and that real social change can help limit that harm. But we're instead focusing on checking our Halloween candy, right? I do want to open it up to folks about for if you have any questions that I can try to best answer. I do really want to encourage folks to check out some other resources. Joel Best and his resources and his website were great. As well, the photo that I got in the last slide is from I think New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition. There are some great harm reduction advocates out there. Feel free to also like take um, take other courses that we offer or workshops that we offer that talk more about drug toxicity or substance use and how to support people. If you do have a second, I would really love if you could do a survey for us. It really helps. Your feedback is like greatly appreciated, helps me learn to like be a better facilitator, and as well, it helps us honestly with continuing to get the funding so we can continue to offer trainings like this to the public. So I would really appreciate it if you could take a second. I will put um, the link to the SurveyMonkey is here. You can, again, just take a picture with your camera, but I can also send anyone the link if need be. Please do feel free to contact us, contact SafeLink for any questions that you have that you're not going to submit today. If you think of them a few days later, that's always how I process. You can email education team at education@safelinkalberta.ca. But otherwise, thank you all so much for coming to my spiel about drugs and Halloween candy. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit, but for now, I'm going to end our recording.